All right, we are good to go. Oh, Ginger always has pens.
All right. We're a couple minutes past 7. I'm going to bring the meeting to order. Don Berube from 135 River Road.
Mike Wayne, Select Board Rep.
Carrie McNamee, Community Development Director.
Tom Sandall, and I do drive. Kim McDaniel, 173.
All right. So we got no minor modifications or conceptual consultations tonight and no public hearings. So we're going to go right to old business. Review potential zoning ordinance amendments.
Right, I have a few updates, few things to go over. I don't anticipate this being a session.
Yes, sir.
Too happy. So we'll jump right in. One thing we had talked about previously was the definition of a butter and how we have two different definitions that are used for one's for planning and one's for zoning. I did bring that question to the ZBA. I know the planning board was leaning toward using the definition that the planning board uses, which includes the properties within 200 feet. The ZBA was very strongly against that, and they felt that they should definitely use the definition that is in the state RSA, which I think is a good point.
What's the state RSA?
That one is basically all the properties that touch it or are across the street or across the stream. The planning board adds 200 any properties within 200 feet.
So
Ours is more.
ours is,
More
it includes
restricted,
more people. Which I think for notifying people, it's definitely good to go out. So, I mean, when somebody has a right of way between them, a 10-foot right of way, they're not, would they be in a butter? I mean, we do have places where there's a short piece of, I mean, I can give you an example on River Road, on the residential end of River Road. The lot that Audley just bought used to be Boone's. And then there's actually it's 167 feet that Whaler owns that's on the corner of 3A. And then there's another lot. So if we didn't have the 200 feet, when Audley wanted to do something, which they were talking about doing something, the next property that has a house on it is, there's a strip of land that's less than 200 feet, wouldn't get notified, which in really, there's a site plan going in, it seems like they should get notified.
What was their saying? The RSA.
Basically, they were wondering where the authority comes from to allow a planning board to choose its own definition for a butter.
Which I get.
And I don't know the answer to that.
So I guess if we have our definition of a butter, but can we have, within our I mean, I guess they're not in the butter, but really what we want, or I think that we should have is that in notifying people, especially for site plan, that it's, includes any, abutters in any properties within 200 feet. Do you do it as two separate things in our rules? So an abutter and as an abutter.
Maybe we just keep the status quo and let.
I guess I don't see what the downside is. It still meets the requirement.
Right, it's not more restrictive, it's less restrictive. I mean,
It's more, well, it's not really that it's restrictive. It's not whether it's restrictive or not. It's just whether, who gets notified. Really, I mean, they're not, if you're not touching, you're not in the butter or not directly across the right of way, this road, you're not in the, you're not technically in a butter, but it's a matter of who would notify and what the purpose is of being considered a butter.
And I think maybe that would come up with appeals. If you expand the definition of a butter, does that expand the pool of people that could potentially appeal a decision. And I think that was one of the reasons why the CBA felt that we shouldn't. I think the main argument though was the state has a definition, it's in the RSA,
Simple.
Which
and who are we to change it?
it's actually, it is I mean, it's a great argument and they're right. But I guess, it's just, I just think it's nice to be able to notify the neighborhood of what's going on.
I do think that we should, the definition.
That was the reason I brought it up in the first place, is that it's awkward that we have two, but now that when I first started here, it's like, how do I know which definition to use? Now I understand it and I can remember it, but
So what do we do?
I do it.
Good evening, Mike. Sorry, I'm late.
we're just talking about the definition of a butter.
Okay.
So options include doing nothing and just keeping for site plans and subdivision applications that we use the 200 feet. CBA can keep doing their state definition and we just leave it as it is.
So when somebody has to go before the zoning board, and actually that same property that Ozzy owns on the corner of the road. Like I was kind of wondering, like I thought my house was
Right.
kitty cornered,
Right.
but actually more than 200 feet. So it didn't pop up, but it wouldn't have. So they didn't have to notify within 200 feet?
Yeah, they just have to do this. Says any person whose property is located in New Hampshire and adjoins or is directly across the street or stream.
Would it cause problems with being different? If they go to the ZBA and they consider 200 feet. And they approve it,
And then they
And
come
we-
here and have to re-notify.
yeah, I mean,
That list gets longer.
that might create issues.
I mean, so we have two different definitions that we use currently.
But I'm saying, could it cause a problem? Well, I wasn't notified when I went to the zoning board, but now you're notifying me after they approved it.
I guess,
Yeah,
having the definition of an abutter, I mean, it is somebody that's. I think the zoning board's definition is correct. But when it comes to, notifying your neighbors, I think it would be good to add that.
So you're saying we would keep the definition of a butter and say for notification, you have to notify all the abutters plus anyone who's within 200 feet.
Yeah.
That doesn't make them an abutter, it just.
Yeah,
means
so we have,
one extra that you notify.
That would be my preference. So it's uniformity, but I think of some developments and it will clearly impact people close by or not.
yeah,
And so I think if we could unify the definition of butter, but as a practical measure for the town, be more inclusive of notification.
because, I mean, we definitely have many non-conforming lots that don't have 200 feet of frontage. So, I mean, you could have it's not a right of way, but there's this small strip of property that's 20 feet wide and you don't know that all of a sudden there's a subdivision going in. You don't get noticed, you don't find out until late. I mean, they're probably gonna find out anyways, but
is that possibly an error question?
Could be. But I do like that approach where we keep the state definition of a butter, but then we just that would be in the site plan and subdivision regs, and what we would say that we would, because you can notify whoever you want, right?
Yeah. I mean, when the town, if there's something like when the power plant put it a stack, they had to notify any town that would see it. It went to notifications,
Like the cell tower thing.
or the cell tower, you
Yeah,
notify
10
towns. and-
miles, right?
Yeah,
Is a butter defined anywhere else in that regulation other than, does it apply to anything other than?
That's a good question.
It
Because then it'd be
also-
weird if it's, if we defined it as one thing and so then you have to do the, you know, for notification purposes, but if a butter is only a term that's used for notifications or only applies to notifications.
It also applies to, people speaking at a public hearing. You don't have to let non-butters speak at a public hearing. We typically we do. Um, yeah, that actually came up at the ZBA. There are some people who are not butters who wanted to speak.
They said no.
They did let them speak, but they messaged me. And made it clear that they were not a butters. And, so.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, is there other times where, I mean, besides notification that a butters does come in? I guess, you know, so
It's-
speaking,
Yeah.
can you think of
Yeah,
any
because
other?
even so there's a line that says for purposes of receiving testimony only and not for purposes of notification. The term abutter also includes any person who is able to demonstrate that their land will be affected by the proposal.
Is that in the RSA or
Yes.
that's in the RSA?
Yeah. It's in both.
I mean, and with that, as far as letting somebody speak, I mean, and I could see where there would be times where, you know, somebody on the other side of town saying they don't want the subdivision, you know, enough. But, you know, when it's, that subdivision is down the street from you, 500 feet or whatever you want to know,
It seems like we should just change the definition of letter to 200 feet. But like, I don't know, like. Does the zoning board have a say if we want to change the definition? Like, can we change their definition?
It's in the zoning ordinance, which
we could, but I mean, I get it, and I like the fact of staying with the state reg, and a butter is on a butter. And that's,
that definition is established.
Yeah. you know, so I guess if we consider an abutter, like if you have two different people that are arguing about something, go to court, you know, well, you're not even about, oh, but according to the town, I am an abutter. You know, so it would get that out, you know, according to the state, you know, but, you know. I'm just trying to think of the reasons where it would happen. And I mean, being with the state reg is that's definition, I think is the better way to go to. But I also think it's good to, in a site plan, whether it's a commercial or subdivision, to notify more people.
So as far as, so in the zoning ordinance, which is what we're talking about now, it just says the abutter is as defined in RSA 672:3. So I think we're saying we're gonna leave that as is. In a future conversation, when we address subdivision and site plan regulation amendments, we can fine tune any changes we want to make there. But as far as zoning amendments, I don't think we have any. Right?
No, so because we're talking about changing the zonings.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that makes sense.
As long as we don't make it about you, you make it more restrictive. You can't make it less restrictive. But you can't say 100 feet.
No,
You know, it has to be 200 feet.
and the 200 feet makes sense because if you're more than, you know, a legal law away, you're not an abutter, and that's what, you know, an abutter. If you don't have the frontage, you know, if you pass that frontage, it's. And I think it, you know, it comes into play when there is only that 50 feet or. And I know we, you know, there's places that there are like that, that has.
Some of these things on my little list here are,
So if somebody was 1,000. Well, never mind. I had a duh.
Sometimes you just gotta say it.
Yeah, I had a duh.
But what's it, Woodville hooks it, they've been trying to do peace, and like all the neighbors on that road, are, they come in pretty excited about it and want to know about what's going on, but really only a couple are butters.
All right, so temporary structures and uses, I think we addressed that already. We're gonna add another section to explain that. The daycares we addressed. Driveways, we said we were gonna keep it at 15 feet from the property boundary, and we will need to update the driveway regulations separately. Telecommunications Committee released a second round RFP, but it does not include the zoning portion because we only got one bid. We sent it out the first time, and it seems that that was the problem, is that no one wanted to do the RF engineering and review the zoning ordinance. Very different set of skills. So we separated out and put it out for just the RF engineering. So any updates to the zoning ordinance will not come from that process. We have talked a little bit with the town attorney, who said they can help us with that some. So I don't know if we, ideally that process would coincide with the RF engineering and the two would mesh. So I don't see that happening for this year's town meeting. Do you agree?
And the changes there would be like around height and stuff,
That would probably be the major one.
so we didn't have to get grant waivers.
I mean, you might still, but I think everyone agreed that the 90 feet isn't,
Sufficient.
doesn't work today or in Bow.
Okay.
There may be other changes, but I think that's gotta be the top.
And any idea how the neighbors sued this fighting?
No, still in the judge's hands. Haven't got any ruling yet. That I've heard. And Eric said it would probably take some time. So if we. Person's gonna go out. Our firm's gonna go out. Do the evaluations as far as where there should be a tower.
I assume they'd also say what the height of the tower.
Correct.
And then coinciding with that, we would decide we want to change the height restrictions, okay?
And
Well,
But you're saying it's not intact for this time?
the RFP closes on January 15th, so I don't think it's just not gonna happen.
yeah, and the surveys, they're gonna give us 190 feet. They can even give us 300 feet. I mean, they'd have to light it and do all the other things associated with it, but they could come in 250 foot top. We don't know. So if they do that, we don't have the zoning changes in. Yeah, it's a catch-22.
Yeah, they kind of have to
It's
go.
catch
they have to go
22.
hand in hand.
Yeah. So we'd have to go out. Are we gonna ask, what, do we ask for alternatives? We ask for best case.
Yeah, I think they'll have to run it at different rates, try to let us know what would be ideal, what would be reasonable, what would.
Sticking back to the one tower to.
Yeah.
Think
Well, I can talk to Eric about it and see.
if we knock it off,
We worked a lot on, the height of the telecommunications tower. Like we said, right now, how the regs are, it lets us waive that, and that was their big problem, was waiving that. I mean, I think it would be pretty good if our, regs allowed up to what the FAA would allow without a light. I don't want to say in exact footage because the FAA sometimes can require less than the 200, I think it's 200 feet. That's why they got 190. You know, you know, if it doesn't require a light by the FAA, I think, you know, it should be allowed. It's kind of where I'm. But I don't know if that
What's stopping
works.
us from saying now you'd like to change it to 190? Or a height that doesn't require light.
What's stopping me might be voters at town meeting.
That's all, yes. Besides democracy. I mean, stopping us as a board from not waiting for the RFP.
I think
Yeah.
I think pretty much.
I mean, that's the tree line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, doesn't get
Based
its
on
own
the
tree.
topology.
And I mean, it's, you know, are they, is a cell tower unsightly? Sure, it's a, you know, big piece sitting up. Run down 3A, especially around Gaponi, I think all them power lines are unsightly. You know, when they first went up, people probably hated them. You're gonna put telephone poles with wires running all over, it's terrible. But it's second nature, you know, because we need it, it's infrastructure. You don't notice it, you know, so with that is where I, you know, I can see the light wanting to put an extra piece, so in that,
Because if we don't do this, and there's a comprehensive plan, and someone comes in and wants to build it, we're either gonna have to do the whole waiver process, or it's gonna take so long that in 2025, this will go before the voters. So why wouldn't we just do it now?
If we address that, should we address the camouflage issue?
What was the rule of
can't-
camouflage? Because they had to make some effort to, it wasn't said camouflage, but we used some wording.
The stealth.
Stealth technology.
I thought, didn't it have to be like a monopole or something?
It didn't say that. But,
There was a discussion about what stealth was, because we all agreed like the janky tree was hardly stealth.
Yeah.
Some good stuff. Like, it's about.
Yeah.
Matching building.
Yeah. But I agree with, I mean, I think we should put it to the voters
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
A more
And
height,
if they
and you know what, if it fails,
No.
well, if now
that
it's,
actually helps some design, it may change the design that comes.
yeah,
Yes.
and it takes. It takes the arguments out, you know, you're right, you know,
If the voters say no, then whoever's doing the design will have to say, okay, I'm working with an
Yeah.
assumption that 90-foot towers are the only guarantee that this gets done.
Is there a benefit to waiting for this RF engineering study to be done so that we have another data point to point to that it's necessary? Because if we like put it out to voters like right now, say, well, we don't want 100, that does that hurt us down the road when we try to put it out there?
I think if the scenario was such that the RF engineering plan came back and said, you know, 150 feet would probably do it in this location, but you already tried and failed at 190. And you could maybe 150, if you'd done 150 from the start, you would have been in a better place. It's hard.
I guess so, what, and at that point, 150, 190. It's not, I mean, I think, you know, the fact of keeping where it needs a light.
Yeah.
And even you know. In somewheres in there, it should be, because I think there are cases where less than 190, the FAA would require a light. I'm not sure
Yeah.
when or where, but, you know, if it would be an special exception if FAA requires it to be lit.
But on the flip side, if they say 190,
Is it tall enough? Needs to be.
and then it needs a light, well, then it's,
They'd have to come get it.
Yeah.
Get it.
Right.
I could see, you know, and I would see a lot more people opposed to that blinking light out there, which, again, in time, it's gonna be just as common as the telephone poles.
Right.
You know,
I mean, if the only thing. Just find the part where it talks about the height.
I think once, you know, if we decide we could do that, we should have a public hearing here. We also need the, torches outside.
It's pretty easy to do this. Yeah, I'm not sure I can verbalize this as well as I want to, but if we decide that this is a reasonable thing, before we decide where each poll goes, we're not playing favorites or anything. We're not bowing to immense pitchfork pressure. We've just made a rational decision around what we know about cell phone technology, not taking into account specific instances right there. It seems fair for some.
It puts, you know, in the public hearing and the public voting on it, it puts it to where it's not just people with it's in my backyard, oh my God. You know, because they don't know whose backyard is gonna be. It's a general thing. Could be anybody's backyard. And maybe, you know, with that, maybe it's
Yeah,
mine.
it-
If I had higher ground, I'd be trying to rent that space, but
So,
What's the consensus?
so right now it currently says. Shall not exceed 90 feet in height, measured as the vertical distance from the average finished grade surrounding the facility to its highest point. So. As far as making a zoning amendment, it's pretty easy to cross out 90 and put in whatever number you want.
Okay.
I mean, the part I'm not sure, but I think it is
You wanna,
the 190 that, you know, where it doesn't require, the light, I think is the big key.
yeah, so how would you wanna phrase that?
Say 190 or the maximum height that does not require.
Well,
Right.
now if 250 didn't require a light, it would be okay.
But you say 190 or A lesser
Unless it needs a
number.
light.
But what if you find out 10 years from now that 190 feet is not sufficient?
And then do another.
Then we
zoning
have to
amendment.
go. Right back.
Yeah.
Cross that number.
But I mean, from what we, you know, from what we've heard this year, you know, 190 does seem to be the magic number from what we've heard.
Well, they didn't want to put a wire. That's why
Yeah.
they held it at one. That's the
Yeah.
only reason.
And that makes sense.
And they provided adequate coverage.
Yeah.
For what we requested of them.
So to allow 190 feet unless it's FAA requires a light.
Well, and that doesn't say that we can approve something or grant a waiver for something greater than 190.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then you don't need to waive it. If it's can be, if it's 190, doesn't need a light,
Yeah.
they're not applying for a
If it's
waiver.
greater.
If it's
than
greater, now we're back to, you know,
190, we
seeing,
need a waiver.
we need a waiver. You know,
And getting this advice on getting the wording just right and making sure see if he has any other comments. Just, just because it's a sensitive issue. I wanna make
it
sure
is a
he's-
sensitive issue, but I think there should be something on the ballot this year or on the next voting.
Do we want to address the stealth issue too?
What was the wording on that?
That's what I'm just, well, not-
Just makes it worse.
Some of the stuff that.
Yes.
So I don't think I'd want to take away that, I think, sorry, go ahead.
It depends on, so we've got separate area sections for wooded fields, then wooded areas. It should not project higher than 20 feet above the average tree canopy. It must be camouflaged to blend in with the natural character of such area, must employ stealth technology in order to make the site less obtrusive to surrounding properties. Appropriate stealth technologies for wooded areas include ranger or forest fire watch towers, artificial trees, or other structures acceptable to the planning board. And then in fields or agricultural areas, it should look like an agricultural silo, windmill, or other structure.
We have to strike the 20 feet above the canopy. too,
Yeah,
because that's height. We want to strike anything that contradicted.
I can understand putting pine branches on a tower that's 20 feet above the canopy. That's not gonna be, you know, stand out like a sore thumb.
We want 190 foot.
So when Florida first had big silos, you know, they were ugly. Sure, somebody didn't like it.
All the old blue silos,
Yeah, what, you know,
the porcelain
and then
silos.
they,
The design shall use materials, colors, textures, screening, and landscaping to blend, mitigate the effects of noise, and then should be a color.
yeah,
Talked about the color, and then there. So this says towers shall not be artificially lighted unless required by the FAA. We'll make sure that.
I think most of that really
Gotta go.
gotta go,
Yeah, I agree.
personally,
I agree.
because I mean, it just,
It's not flying anymore, I don't think, I think it's just.
you know, if you can keep it to, you know, have it, you know, I don't know how you simplify that. If they can make it a little, you know, with color, with, you know, something, so it's a little less intrusive. But because most things you add to it just make it worse.
In the zoning ordinance, but I almost want it to say something like, to the extent practical, you should.
Yeah, I would make it more general. Those are very specific.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I'm gonna have a chat with them.
We have to bump it up against the Telecommunications Act. Yeah. I mean, he has experts that in his.
I will talk to him about getting a few changes made to that, at least focusing on the stealth technology and the height. Sandy and I met yesterday to go over some changes to the table of uses in the Wetlands Conservation District. I haven't been able to type those up yet because we just met yesterday. And I've been home with a sick kid. I know, she doesn't let me, I tried and she kept adding her own comments.
Intelligent comments? You sure?
So the main things we focused on were that table of uses that says what you can and can't do in the wetlands district, and like adding where things just say not permitted, where they should really say conditional use permit, like erecting a structure within a wetland buffer. You can get a conditional use permit for that, but now it just says it's not permitted.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing we worked on. So I'll bring that back. One of the big things I wanted to talk to you about tonight was detached ADUs. I might have mentioned it earlier on, and it's something that's been coming up a lot at our office lately. I think I counted 3 in less than 2 weeks, people who were coming in asking about building a detached ADU on their property. I got some data about other towns and what they allow. And So,
Definitely some changing times of, you know, with, just needing housing. I mean, when
Yeah.
your kids, want to live here, but,
yeah, a lot of people trying to aging parents. They want
Yeah.
to be close, but independent still. So in this list of New Hampshire towns, there were 108 that do allow detached and 97 that don't. So of the towns that have an ordinance for ADUs, more than half of them do permit detached. Some of them allow attached just as a right and require something like a conditional use permit if it's detached. So the board could review it and make sure it's actually compatible with the site. Some just allow it detached or attached regardless. A couple of nearby towns. So Dunbarton and Hopkinton and Bedford all allow detached. As kind of some somewhat similar neighboring towns.
Currently, we don't allow it, or we don't say. Okay,
No,
we
it's not
don't.
allowed. A lot of people asking about getting a variance for it. That's one of those triggers. If there's a common thing that people are seeking variances for over and over again, it's time to consider if the ordinance needs to be updated.
What are the restrictions associated with putting it detached from those other towns? What are the restrictions? Usually square footage.
Right, and so all of our current rules, restrictions about the size and everything would still apply. Some of them require that it's visually compatible with the home, like you have to have it, it has to be the same colors and style as the house.
Separate well, their own well, their own septic system.
Those, there aren't really usually requirements about that. You have to have the septic capacity, or at least a plan for the septic capacity.
yeah, I think that would,
But it's the same whether it's attached to your house or not. A lot of people interested in putting in something that looks like a barn or like a cottage. I think the ones that people have come to me, I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. That would be adorable. It would look great. And just because it's not physically attached to the house, it's not allowed.
yeah, I think it's definitely, we should look at that because
Long as a lot big enough, I mean.
yeah, as long as the lot can handle
Yeah.
it, their septic can
Yeah.
handle it or can be made to handle it. I think that, they almost should tie into the same leach field. I mean, because how much you want to spread out?
Yeah.
But that part, I mean, as far as the septic and well part, that's the state regular. Cover most of that. right?
Yes, and the size in Bow is capped at 800 square feet of habitable area. So that
That
doesn't,
sounds low.
it does, but it doesn't count hallways, bathrooms, closets. It's just the actual habitable space. So like the actual kitchen, bedroom, living room, the actual rooms.
So I have one in my house actually, situation, and I think it's about 800. It's pretty big, two bedrooms, bathroom. It's like perfect. My in-laws could have had, I don't know.
We're streaming live, Michael.
Yeah. And like when we were before we moved to just about all the neighboring towns allow that. Luckily, we found a house that already had one, so we didn't have to do it. But it's definitely a hot market for those.
And we get questions, people come in constantly asking about ADUs in general, but a lot looking to do detached lately. So I would definitely
I'm not
recommend.
sure. In-laws really want it. I think it's gonna be so common.
Yes.
I think that if we can make it work, that it doesn't. Like, if there's space to do it, I just don't see why.
We also require that at least one of the units must be owner occupied. So you can rent out you could rent out the ADU if you wanted to. It doesn't
You
have to
can't
be,
rent it, though.
but you can rent out both. The owner has to live in one of the units.
That makes sense.
I don't know, I guess that's kind of. Yeah,
Yeah, it would-
is that how, like Dunbarton and
Yeah,
Hopkinton?
that actually.
I mean, that's really two good towns to compare to.
Yes, I have this little spreadsheet of all the towns that allow them, and
I did look at a website about tiny houses too. And
So-
they're lobbying all kinds of, all the states for tiny houses. Yeah, nothing in New Hampshire. Well, they're talking about it. It's been a while since I looked at the website.
yeah, just scrolling through here, most of them require that one of the units are owner occupied.
I said, that makes sense.
So some of them do require a CUP for a detached, so that is one thing to consider if you want to review detached here or not.
And I guess that's the big part is, is it? Yeah, to trigger them to come before.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I mean, a CUP is obviously a much lower standard than a variance. A variance is a high legal standard you have to meet. So a CUP would definitely be an easier process than a variance, but it would still be time and money.
Yeah, you gotta get a little more plan together to.
That's okay. It's done right.
Consensus as to whether or not you would want a CUP.
I think so.
Yeah, I would think so. It's not that onerous, but it does allow some oversight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Yeah,
have,
cause I could definitely see, I can put up a second house on my property now.
So-
Oh, am I gonna put another driveway for that? Am I gonna,
so I will say, I mean, the building permit process, it is obviously being reviewed. They're checking to make sure it meets the size requirement. So it is being reviewed by the building inspector. It's not a free for all.
yeah,
But by coming here, I think you would have a little more say about the aesthetics of it. Where the building inspector's not gonna tell you, oh, really, you should paint that green, or do you really wanna use that kind of siding? Maybe you should have bigger windows. I think you could have more say about that if you wanted to. The building inspector's just gonna make sure it meets the requirements and that it's built to code. You guys could say, hey, that really just looks like a shed. Maybe you should make it look nicer. Is that a doghouse or?
and it's, once again. It was there and we see what comes in, it's something that we could change down the road, so
We
it's
get a
kind
chance
of
every year.
stepping it. Yeah,
I have one more ADU question for you.
so the surrounding towns, are they limited to 800 square feet?
That's pretty common, yeah.
That's not bad. Yeah. I think we're looking at Auburn. I think theirs is like 650.
Yeah,
But
You're not putting 3 more kids in there.
right, exactly.
Yes, and so yeah, also one ADU per lot is allowed, so you can have multiples. So-
You have an ADU?
So the part that's a little tricky is that, so it says the single family dwelling is located on a lot having at least the minimum lot area or frontage required by the ordinance, or is on a non-conforming lot served by sewer. So between lot area, frontage, and sewer, you have to have one of the 3 at least. Which is pretty reasonable.
So. What about in our open space development
That's
where,
exactly my question for you.
so,
You
yeah,
caught on.
I mean, it's still. I mean, you gotta have the sewer capacity, so, I mean, now if we're on a 1 acre lot or, we can actually get down to less than 1 acre lots on an open space development.
So that is my question, and in your open space section, it says that only one single family dwelling with an ADU as permitted in section 7.04 shall be permitted per lot. So your open space development does consider the fact that you may have an ADU.
Yeah. I mean,
But,
it's detached, and it's not gonna be detached by much.
but my question is, so whether it's attached or not, can you have so ADU section says you have to have at least the minimum lot area or frontage required by the ordinance. So I would take that to be the 2 acres, 200 feet. So
Well,
then you get to
if
an
it-
open space and obviously you're not gonna meet that.
but it's really, it is because the ordinance for an open space is
It's different.
different.
Yeah.
They're meeting the open
They're
space
they're meeting
development
it. So
ordinance.
is that the interpretation? Does that mean, that's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to talk to you guys about what was intended there. Cause that exact situation has come up in the past week or so.
I mean, if we're allowing the ADU in the open space development, I mean, now we're only, the difference is, you got some space between the two. I mean, I don't see the problem with that. I mean, it's still, the smaller lot, they're gonna have to have the septic and the well for it. If you don't have
Doesn't
that,
fit.
you can't build. It don't fit. Yeah, but I would say, meeting the lot requirement is, if it's an open space development, it's a legal lot.
That's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to.
I guess
Make sure
where it
you
would
guys
be
agree.
if it's something on a non-conforming lot. Then because we do have, many houses on non-conforming lots. Right? So then
Only
they
if you're
can't,
surprised. That's what I says.
and really any open space developments is all pretty new developments.
Exactly.
The non-conforming lots are old lots.
Yeah.
While we're talking about the housing crunch, a resident reached out to me actually last year, and then she reached out again to remind me, that in January of 2022, the board held a public hearing to propose changes to the zoning ordinance to eliminate duplexes and multifamily housing. And in the minutes from January 20th, 2022, it does say that members further discussed the rationale for removing the sections completely and possibly coming back to review the duplex regulations next year. So she's asked the board going to reconsider allowing duplexes in certain
The town
areas.
voted what year to not allow
2020,
2020?
wait, 2021?
Not allow.
Yeah, maybe I got the, hold on.
new
That's,
rules.
that was a result of,
So,
yes, the kind of conception of sawmill. They wanted to build.
So
Yeah.
start 2022, what that was really. Yeah, so last year.
So we get to see what happens if you allow duplexes. You get, we've seen a plan that does that, which was the neighbors were not happy.
Which plan?
The saw,
the original.
oh, the original sawmill. I mean, there wasn't,
I don't think I knew about.
It was. One reason we got involved. I'm not a butter, but it's nearby, and it's like, it was 30 duplexes.
Oh, it was more than
It was,
that.
it was a ton.
Yeah, they were getting, I mean, total units, it was like 100 units
Over
plus, and then
100,
over
yeah.
100 units would have ended up in that.
So I can see why this was a reaction.
Yeah, very specific, yeah.
Okay.
So this person's asking whether we would, the towns voted to not allow this in the rural district, so to reconsider it.
Specifically duplexes, I think she's not so much the multifamily housing, but duplexes. And that just because the board said that they were open to reconsidering it in the future, so.
I mean, personally, if we considered anything, would only be in our conventional lots, not in open space development, because that was the, it was,
That's how they were getting.
that's how they're getting so many. I mean, if you got one duplex on a 2-acre lot, we're not so bad there, but if, you got duplexes on 3/4 acre lots, because that's about what it was, right? That was,
Some of the downline.
if that,
Check that.
I mean, the problem is anything, as we change these regs, it isn't the individual, oh, I'm gonna build a duplex, live on one side. It's the developer that comes in is gonna maximize anything that we do.
Yeah, I was thinking about that same thing. It's like, oh, one duplex. If someone wants to just convert their one home, but it's not that, right? It's a whole development.
Yeah, it's gonna come in with a subdivision, and how many can I fit in? So that's the part of not allowing and we don't have a zone where we really do. Where it is allowed, right? Is there any? I mean, we're all,
The mixed use district doesn't specify, it just says that residential is allowed, so.
Yeah.
It
So
doesn't
there
mean
would-
any type of residential, but other than that, it's not allowed anywhere else. Yeah, because you took out the use entirely, like it's just deleted.
and really, I mean, the multi-family or duplexes, in the rural area, you are, it's taxing the schools. That would definitely bring in, I can see, the development, what they're talking about over here, where it's more geared towards the young professionals isn't, but if it's I can, the 2-acre lot in the middle of, it's gonna be pretty appealing to the new family.
I'd be interested to see what the surrounding towns do with duplexes. What are the restrictions?
List of all the properties. District by lot size. So you can see there are only 7, the top 7 ones are over 5 acres. That's what we were looking at last time, is how many lots are actually over 5 acres. And they are one state owned. The 3 Colby properties, which are together, the Concord Mutual Insurance, and then the church and the Van Dyke property that's adjacent to the Colby properties. So there's not a lot of large lots.
Didn't think so.
A lot of little ones. The Baker Free. I was looking at that, like,
Adams.
taking a little specific on that one, huh? Oh, 909,985 of an acre.
Oh, yes.
They're counting every square inch on that one.
Yeah, I guess they did, huh? The town wanted to get their money's worth.
Of an acre. How many square inches is that?
And he did just send me another draft, but I haven't had time to go through it. He just sent it yesterday. But we worked on incorporating some of the things we talked about last time. I know we struggled at the last meeting talking about the commercial residential mix and how to set that. He felt that a percentage was appropriate and maybe just saying no more than 75. I think the 75-25 split he felt would be a good way to do that. I mean, it's hard to pick a number, but saying no more than 25% residential. That was really the only way to set a limit on the mix.
There's 25,000 ground floor.
So we are currently talking about the ground floor, but at the last meeting, we kind of talked about how it's not really practical. The market doesn't seem to be supporting that concept where the commercial on the first floor and residential above it sounds great, but apparently in practice, it's not being built. So instead, just limiting the overall percentage of residential within the development. So
Yeah, I guess when you have that percentage, is it 25% square footage?
Yeah.
Is it 25% of, living? So just,
Individual units.
Okay, so I'm going to work with Stu a little bit more on that, and I think we've gone round and round, but I think we're gonna try to simplify things as much as we can on that. Yeah, we came up, the two of us get talking, we came up with all these crazy ideas with all these different tracks, but I want to simplify it. And it seems to make sense to possibly distinguish between lots that are greater than or less than 5 acres, just as a bigger development versus the small development. But besides that, I think we'll try to keep it simple, and we'll work in that new use of the small scale artisan manufacturing. We'll add that in. We will take out the requirement that the residential is above commercial. I think that should work. Look at the calendar. I think we would schedule the public hearings in January. 2023. So at your regular January meetings, we could get the public hearings scheduled. So we'll
that
have,
third Thursday.
yeah. And then that
So-
gave us, I think I looked at it and we had the first meeting in February was also right before the deadline. So
So
you have-
continued, you've got.
you've
yeah,
got room to do 2 public hearings. Them that are fall right on.
In our next meeting this month, we already are getting a pretty full agenda right here.
Yes. Yes, we have a few things for that, and then we've got a couple things for January. We have 2
Yeah,
already for
I seen
January.
a one-year one.
Another one, Ginger said another one came in today.
Which to January, the one that I seen today was basically a lot line.
I didn't send one to you.
There's
today.
another one.
There's
too.
another one that
Oh,
came in
that's-
today.
Subdivision, oh, like
Yeah.
just a
I
2 lot.
seen the one off Sundance, which is just a lot line.
Yeah, the first one was all.
That one, knock on wood, should be very simple. Yeah, close enough.
I don't remember, did she?
Me and my do we want to wait to approve them until they meet the comment then, or? Usually have some pretty good comments.
Yeah.
I've read them.
Yeah, so we should probably hold off in a minute.
That makes sense. Do you wanna, set them in the center of the table and we'll collect them so that we don't have to reprint them for the next?
Good
meeting?
idea. Things to discuss?
Second.
Yes. Yeah, we're all, everybody's voting. So you can have a quorum.
Sure, did you second it?
Pick somebody. There,
Yeah, pick somebody. Yeah.
all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.